no local board input, but just acknowledge the wonderful local board members who are here. Extraordinary business, there is none. So we move on to the Waikomiti Cemetery and the report on public engagement. So I'd just like to welcome Rob Cairns and Mace Ward just to take us through what we'll be going to talk to our community about. Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just I'll take the report as read. I'll just a couple of minutes to set the context and what we're recommending here. So I guess the broader context is Waikomiti, obviously a long history of a place for burial for Auckland. It is starting to reach the end of its current capacity. When we say that, we mean at the moment, with the current amount of burial plots that are available, there will be, for future sales, we estimate sort of 3 to 4 years worth of future sales. The cemetery will, of course, operate well beyond that point with burials in existing sold plots and ash interments in the crematorium. So there's lots of life left in Waikomiti. It's just finding space for future burials for sales. In light of that, we've been looking at investigating options for the potential to implement additional burial capacity at Waikomiti. The first step we've done for that is really assessing all the areas that are out there, reviewing them against a number of criteria, which includes ecological values, operational requirements, the topography of the land, the likely financial constraints, just really to understand what might be possible. The intent is to, and we've got some recommendations within that area that's not developed of what we think might be possible and some areas that we don't think will be possible to develop. We'd like to take that information out to the community and engage with the community to get their views on both areas for potential future development and different types of burial. And the types of burial question is one that different types of burial enable us to go into different types of land area. So the proposal is that we go through a period of engagement with the community now based on the sites that are identified as recommended in the report, and that will help us inform a future recommendation to this committee about what areas we think we should look more closely and attempt to get necessary consents, etc., for development. So hopefully that's a sufficient context. The timeline that's just gone up on the screen, that's really just to set the sort of the broader scene for what we're looking at for future development. So we're looking at engagement sort of April, May here. We'd look to be looking at the master plan for the wider cemetery and the concept design for the areas that we think have potential to be developed during the latter half of this year. Then we'd go into a consent application process. Now, depending on what areas we're doing, that process may be difficult. There'll certainly, we imagine, be a notification period. Much of the land that isn't currently development is a significant ecological area under the unitary plan. So there will be a regulatory path to get through there. And we would hope to be in a position for those areas subject to consent in sort of 2021 to start the development process and to keep the life of the cemetery going for as long as seemed appropriate. So I'm happy to take any questions, Mace or I, on any of the details. Yeah, if it helps, I can. So those are the development proposed zones. So that's a bit of a composite map. What we've done is look at all the, each of those blobs effectively represents an area of the cemetery that isn't currently developed. What's probably more sensible is each of the colours represents a group of areas that are broadly similar and has a similar set of constraints. So what we're suggesting is the areas that are marked as yellow and orange on that map, zone 1 and 2, we think they're the areas that are worth looking more closely at and engaging with the community on. That the yellow areas are the ones that are sort of the lower ecological values, are easily accessible by existing infrastructure, and do seem to quite readily allow themselves for future expansion. Orange is a bit more tricky. Some of the areas are steeper, some of the ecological values are a bit more significant, so we need to look a bit more closely at those. And then we get to zone 3, 4 and 5. They're just very, very hard. Very steep land, high ecological values. The cost of getting roading in there for the infrastructure to support the operation of a cemetery is very difficult. We believe it's really not worth looking at those in any further. They're too hard. So that might be enough from me, I suspect.
Marvellous. Councillor Cooper.
I don't have any questions, but I'm very happy to move this, knowing the history. And if there's no questions, I would like to speak to it, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll just check for questions. I've got Councillor Walker and Councillor Casey so far, and Councillor Collins. Councillor Walker, just so we're just on questions.
And I got the button right. So I've actually got a question. It's not about this cemetery, but it's a useful time for me to ask it. And it goes to the domain that continues to be in a parlous state, arguably one of our oldest and historically significant cemeteries. So I might as well ask the question now. Does the budget across cemeteries run across the region? And if that is the case, is there some prioritisation of spending around existing problems as much as there is around effectively new burials? I hope it's not a dead issue.
I think, I'm not sure, so closed burial sites are managed in a different way. So they're managed as effectively as open space, as local parks, and the operation of those and the management of those closed burial sites is done as a piece of open space. Open burials, open cemeteries are operated as an operational cemetery, and they are regionally funded, operated regionally, and the funding path for those is that the income from sale of plots funds the operation of the active cemetery.
So, further to that, so within a cemetery like Waikimiti, where it's an open cemetery, obviously part of it's historical, some of it quite old, part of it's new. Does the funding stream for the new part pay for the older part?
Yes, Councillor Walker, it does.
Okay, so
the only clarification I have is that it pays for the maintenance. So the owners of the memorials are the families who own the plot. The council doesn't own those, although we do invest through our heritage grants and heritage funds, some LDI from local boards, in protecting the particularly significant graves.
And last question, just very quickly, are you putting up any funding proposal in this year's annual plan for addressing the issues at the domain?
When you say the domain, Councillor Walker, do you mean Simon Street?
Simon Street, sure. Yeah,
I wonder if...
So
can
that's
we
for the
take this-
Waitemata local board, but yes, there's a regular funding stream for restoration as is appropriate.
I just think that might be better directed at the Waitemata local board. Councillor Casey.
One of the risks for Waikimeti, as you note in your report, is consultation fatigue. There's been a lot of questions asked over the years, and I can't actually see in the report the consultation materials. And my question relates to that, and I just wondered, I just Googled other ways of, what did I just Google? Other methods of, other than burying, and I found a whole list of things that I had to look up, such as alkaline hydrolysis, aquamation, cyronics, freeze drying. My question relates to the crematorium. If you're interested in getting people to react, would it be appropriate to suggest that we could look at alternative methods so there's less impact on the ground? Is that part of your consultation? Because that might interest people.
So I'll answer in two parts. Firstly, my apologies, the printed agenda doesn't include the engagement plan that is on the online PDF, but we're just circulating that now. So that's the plan for engagement. But to your question about alternative methods of body disposal, I suppose. At the moment, we aren't including that broad range of methods in the proposed consultation. What we're talking about is alternative methods for burial, whole body burial. It's an interesting question whether we should start to engage with other burial types, and we could certainly think on that. We're not currently proposing it.
So just an added question then, when I looked at your list of methods of burial, is the only option at the moment cremation or burial, or the natural burial? Is that it? There's no freeze drying or alkaline hydrolysis? You haven't trialled that at all?
Councillor Casey, no, we haven't trialled those options. The options available at Waikimete and across cemeteries, we haven't tried freeze dried. That's certainly true. But we have mausolea. So Waikimete has a number of mausolea, both private and public mausolea. We do have across the region vaults and honeycomb methods, ash interment in walls and ash interment in burial in cemeteries, and then body burial, which is typical plot, double depth, and in some very minor cases, triple depth burials.
Just a suggestion, Madam Chair, if we added a question like that in there, should we be trialling other methods of disposing of bodies at Waikimete Cemetery? It might interest the public to submit on the more general issue.
I think, Councillor Casey, when we were with the cemetery staff yesterday discussing this, the cemetery staff at Waikimete are extraordinary, and they are the most approachable, proactive, positive group of people you could possibly wish to meet. We have open days at Waikimete, and just a little plug, our suicide prevention organisation run by Mike King is actually having music in the graveyard on Sunday as a fundraiser for suicide prevention, and I would highly commend that. I think, Councillor Casey, it's an excellent opportunity for us to have a wider discussion about how, what other methods there are, but we're very, very keen that this consultation raises people's discussion levels about, cremation, mausolea, full body burial and natural burial. We've been trying for the last 20 years to really encourage natural burial at Waikimete, so this would be very good to see that discussion deepened. So I think we can do that if people are comfortable with that as an approach. It'd be good.
Just by way of assistance, Councillor Casey, we're expecting the number of deaths we have in Auckland currently is in the order of 8,000, and we're expecting by 20 years from here we'll have 12,000. So we will need to cater for more memorialisation and burial, cremation or other methods of memorialisation in the future.
Just before we go to the recommendation and the speaking to the recommendation, all of these discussions, however, are always overlaid with cultural sensitivities, the huge need for respecting various cultural practices and making sure that we don't lose sight of the ability for our staff and our cemeteries to provide for all of those needs. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Anyone wish to speak to that? I'll ask Councillor Cooper to speak last as she'll close any debate. People are comfortable? No? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Mace and your team for the huge amount of preliminary work you've done, because we met with you last year around this. What I think has been a really sensible recommendation is the exclusion of Zone 3, 4 and 5, given the difficult topographical conditions, but also the highly sensitive nature of the flora there. What's important is, as though this is a regional cemetery, locally it is used as a passive recreation area and much loved, and the local board, well actually both local boards will take a big interest in this. But we know that the intention of it always was to be a cemetery, and that was in 1886, so 133 years it's been a cemetery. But as time's gone on, trees have grown, and of course people's expectations around trees have changed a lot, so we do have to be really careful. So I think recommending zones 1 and 2, which is actually practical in terms of the sensitive areas and also the ability to actually build graves. So I think I really commend this. I think I hope that the public will feed back, and also just mentioning the Waitakere Rangers Local Board often have an open day every year, and that might be another good place in your engagement plan, because people do love coming along to that. They've had high numbers, and it might be just a good place to engage them. But otherwise, thank you for the work, and I'm looking forward to lots of participation in this, because it does affect us all one day. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, I was really remiss in not acknowledging an email from the Waitakere Rangers Local Board that makes it really clear that the Waitakere Rangers Local Board supports the recommendations to consult on options 1 and 2, and for exactly the reasons that Councillor Cooper has so clearly outlined. So I just will table the letter from the Waitakere Rangers Local Board to be included in the minutes. No other discussion? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you to the team.